Counsel?
Thank you, Your Honor. Miss Pryor, you said that when you were at Neverland with the Arvizos children, you walked around the property, right?
Yes.
And do you recall ever going into the theater?
Yes.
And did you go into the theater with the Arvizos children?
Yes.
Do you recall ever going into a dance studio?
I didn't go in, but I looked in it.
Okay, now, when you looked in it, was it locked?
Yes.
And did somebody unlock the door?
No, no one had a key. There was, like, a keypad on the door.
Okay, and did someone know the combination?
Yes, Star opened it.
Okay, did you ever see Star open any other combinations at Neverland?
Just the dance studio and the main house.
Did you ever see Gavin open any combination locks at Neverland?
Just the main house.
Okay, did Star and Gavin tell you they knew the combinations?
Star didn't. He opened the dance studio door. He said no one should be in there.
And did he tell you how he learned the combination?
No.
Did Janet ever complain to you about her children drinking alcohol at Neverland?
No.
Did she ever mention anything about her children drinking alcohol at Neverland?
No.
Do you recall Janet ever commenting about people making millions of dollars off of her son?
Yes.
What did she say about that?
She said everyone around them was making millions of dollars off of the video. She didn't specifically say her sons, but off of this documentary.
Did she complain that she wasn't making millions?
No.
Was that the implication you got from her comment?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the question. It's asked and answered, leading speculation.
Sustained.
Did Janet ever complain that she and her children were beaten up by a group of white boys?
Yes.
What did she say about that?
This was during one of the times when she was telling me what a horrible husband David was, and she told me that David had stood there and watched while some white boys beat up her and her children, her and her 2 sons.
Did she ever mention any lawsuit?
No.
Your Honor, I'd like to show the witness a document that's been marked as Exhibit number 5095, if I may.
All right.
May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. Miss Pryor, have you seen that
Yes, I have.
document before? And what is that?
It's a letter to me from Devellin.
And if you look at the bottom, you see some driver's license information. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that all part of the same document?
Yes, it is.
Did you receive that document?
Yes, I did.
And did Devellin send it to you?
Yes.
Do you know why?
From the looks of it, to give me her mother's license information.
And do you know approximately when she sent you that driver's license information?
It's hard to see here, but I can remember from seeing the letter. It was dated February 13th.
Do you know what year that probably was?
2003.
Okay, I move this document into evidence, Your Honor.
No objection.
It's admitted.
May I approach and retrieve it?
Yes.
Your Honor, could we have the screen to the Elmo?
Your Honor, may we approach on the display of this exhibit?
Because of address information?
The DMV information on it, yes. I don't believe that should be public.
We will not display that information. Devellin, Miss Pryor, Devellin sent you her mother's driver's license information, right?
Yes.
She sent you her mother's address, right?
I believe it was her grandmother's address.
And she sent her mother's birthday information, right?
Yes.
And she sent her driver's license information, right?
Yes, she did.
And was that in relation to the conversations you had, excuse me? Was that in relation to the many conversations you had about their wanting a car?
Yes, it was.
Did you ask for Janet Ventura's driver's license information?
No.
Did you know Devellin was going to send you Janet Ventura's driver's license information?
No.
What was your reaction when you received it?
I guess it was. I knew that they wanted the car, so it didn't really surprise me. Even though she didn't tell me she was sending it, but it didn't really surprise me.
No further questions.
Would you leave that exhibit there for a second? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Miss Pryor, I just want to ask you a few questions. I won't be long.
All right.
With regard to your relationship with the Arvizo family, okay. I believe you've indicated in the past that you found the family to be a very affectionate family, correct?
Yes, very much so.
And in fact, Devellin used, as you've indicated, the term sister in relationship to describe her relationship with you.
Yes.
And they were a family that would like to hug people even the first time they met them, correct?
Yes.
And some people, who aren't familiar with the family or the way they behaved, sometimes took that the wrong way.
I don't know.
Okay, but it didn't bother you that they hugged you.
Not at all.
Okay, and you knew that they were a religious family, correct?
Yes.
They would use the term, God bless, a lot to express thanksgiving for things?
Yes.
And you, in fact, went over to pray one time with Janet, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Now, when you went to the Soto Street apartment, to call it an apartment may even be misleading. It was a one-room apartment, correct?
Correct. It was a studio apartment.
There was no bedroom in it. Everybody was in one room, correct?
Right.
Did you observe mattresses on the floor?
Yes.
And the room was divided off with sheets hanging up just to partition it into certain areas?
I never saw any sheets.
So you just saw mattresses on the floor?
Yes.
And it was your understanding that everybody was sleeping in that one room, correct?
Correct.
Now, you've described how you met Janet Arvizo for the first time, and you've described some of your relationships with the children. I'd like to just review some of this, if we can. You indicated that you and Chris Tucker and your son visited Gavin in the hospital on New Year's Eve, correct?
Correct.
Actually, it was the next year, right?
New Year's Day, yes.
New Year's Day. But it was early in the morning?
Right.
So you got there just in time to be there for the year 2001, correct?
Right. We got there on January 1st, 2001.
Yes, ma'am. When you got there, Janet was not there.
No, she was not.
But you did talk to her on the phone, correct?
Yes, I did.
And when you talked to her on the phone, she thanked you for everything you had done for Gavin, right?
Yes, for her family.
For her family. And she said that, even in that conversation, though she had never met you, she said she loved you for what you had done for them.
Correct.
Now, you talked about Knott's Berry Farm and you talked about the premiere and the Oakland game. But let me ask you another thing about this. Was there an occasion when Chris Tucker's brother got married?
Yes.
And did you go to that wedding?
Yes.
And did you invite the Arvizo children to go with you?
I don't remember if I did or Chris did, but one of us did.
But the Arvizo children went with you to Chris Tucker's brother's wedding, correct?
No, they came in their mother's car.
Okay, I'm sorry. But they were there because you invited them?
Yes.
Either you or Chris.
Yes.
And they were there as your guests?
Yes.
You were with Chris?
Uh-huh.
And were there a lot of people at this wedding? Was it a big wedding?
There were about 60 people altogether.
Okay, and where was it held?
In Pasadena.
At a private club?
It was at a residence.
At a residence?
Uh-huh.
A nice residence?
Yes.
And then you invited them to your son's birthday party at the ranch?
Yes.
And was there an occasion where you actually stayed at the ranch with the children for about a week after the birthday party?
No.
So to your knowledge, was Chris Tucker there with them for about a week during the summer?
I have no idea.
Okay. You weren't there if they were.
I wasn't there.
Okay, fine. Now, Devellin
Devellin.
called you her big sister, right?
Yes.
Did you call her your little sister?
Yes.
And it's clear you have a very strong affection for Devellin and the boys. And she did stay at your house on occasion?
Yes.
Did you find her helpful when she stayed at the house and playing with your son and helping take care of your son?
Yes. She's very nurturing. Very sweet girl.
Very loving girl?
Very loving.
Somebody you really cared for a lot?
Yes.
And still do?
Yes.
Hand me that pen. Now, you told us about attending Develon's graduation from the academy.
Yes.
The Explorer Academy. And when you attended that graduation, did you sit with Janet Arvizo?
Yes, I did.
And it's true, is it not, that on that particular occasion, you actually observed bruises and injuries on Mrs. Arvizo's person, correct?
Yes, I did.
Now, Mr. Mesereau asked you about this conversation about Gavin hurting his arm and the conversation about the glove. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And do you remember you saying to Janet if she needed some equipment, you'd give her the equipment? You'd give her the money to get the equipment, correct?
I said if she needed anything, just to ask, and if I could do it, I would help her.
Did she ever ask you to buy any equipment for the family?
No.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the DSS meeting that you went to with Miss Arvizo. You had at least, as I recall your testimony, at least 2 conversations with her prior to the time that you went to the St. Andrew Street address on the 20th, correct?
I'm sure I had more than 2 conversations.
I said at least 2.
Yes.
And one was the night before where she gave you directions on how to get there.
Correct.
And one was before that in which she expressed to you that there was going to be some kind of a meeting with DSS?
Yes.
And when she talked to you about that, she told you that she was really scared about the meeting, correct?
She didn't say she was really scared about the meeting. She was afraid that her children may be taken from her. I don't know if she was afraid it was going to happen at that meeting, but just the whole surroundings of this documentary and actually someone calling and reporting her to social services was scary for her.
Okay, so she was very concerned about whether or not they might take her children from her.
Yes.
And you knew that that was her mindset before she went into that interview?
Yes.
And the concern was directly related to, as you understand, directly related to the fact that Gavin had appeared with the defendant, Michael Jackson, in the Bashir video, correct?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am. The concern of Mrs. Arvizo was that the DSS folks had focused on the fact that Gavin had appeared in the Bashir video, correct?
I don't know if that was her main concern. I'm sure that had something to do with it since it seems like this investigation had arisen since the documentary aired. But I don't know if that was her main concern, just because her son had appeared in a video with Michael Jackson.
Had you seen the video before you went to the DSS meeting?
Which video?
The documentary.
Yes, I had.
Okay, and you had seen Gavin in the documentary?
Yes, I had.
You recognized him?
Yes.
And you recognized that it was Gavin sitting on the couch with the defendant in this case with his head on his shoulder?
Yes, I did.
And holding hands with him?
Yes.
Okay, and you knew also that during the same documentary. Let's call it a documentary, so we don't confuse it with the other video that you mentioned. That in that documentary also, that Mr. Jackson had stated publicly that he slept with little boys, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, it was the media attention that had been generated by those scenes and those statements that was causing the DSS people to investigate Janet, correct?
I believe so. I'm not sure if there was something else involved, but I believe it was stemming from that documentary.
So this was the nature of the relationship between Gavin and the defendant, Michael Jackson. That was the reason that she was concerned about being declared an unfit mother, or, let me change that, in your words, that they would take the children away at some point.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that, when you were at the DSS meeting, that Janet, at some point you were asked or told that you would have to leave by the Department of Social Services ladies. The social workers, let's just call them that.
Yes.
And you said that Janet objected to that?
Yes, she did.
And you used the word, absolutely objected.
She was adamant.
Okay, and do you remember that?
Yes.
So do you know that that conversation was tape recorded?
What conversation?
The conversation with the Department of, the social ladies, the social workers.
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Have you heard a tape of it?
Not at all.
Did Mr. Mesereau provide you a tape to listen to before you testified?
No.
So you at no time, up to me just telling you this, Did you know that there was actually tape recording of that part of the conversation?
No, actually, I heard that there was a tape recording, but I wasn't aware of it at the time. It was up until recently.
Do you recall during that conversation that when the social workers asked you to leave, that Mrs. Arvizo actually apologized to the social workers for having invited you and said it was her fault for having you come?
I don't remember that.
Now, let's just talk a little bit about a couple of things dealing with some of the conversations that you had with Mrs. Arvizo. Just so we can make it easier for both of us and for everybody, let's give these things different names, okay?
Okay.
I want to ask you some questions about the Martin Bashir documentary, okay?
Okay.
And then there is what has variously been called the rebuttal video that occurred the night before you went over to the house for the Department of Social Services meeting, okay?
Correct.
Alright, now, with regard to the Bashir documentary, it's true, is it not, that Mrs. Arvizo's conversations with you about the fact that no release had been signed dealt with the Martin Bashir documentary, correct?
Prior to the Martin Bashir documentary, I don't recall us having any conversation about any release being signed. It wasn't until 2 to 3 weeks after she was interviewed by the social workers.
Right, but the conversation about that she was complaining about the lack of a release being signed had to do with the Bashir documentary, correct?
Correct.
It wasn't anything to do with the rebuttal film that had occurred the night before the Department of Social Services?
No, it was not.
Alright, let's talk just a little bit about the car.
Okay.
Mr. Mesereau asked you a number of times about them asking for a car, okay? In this particular situation, actually Chris Tucker had given them the car, right, your car, to your knowledge?
He had not given them the car. The car has never left my parking space.
It eventually never went to them, but your understanding was that he had indicated to them that he was giving them your car, correct?
Yes.
As a gift?
Yes.
Out of the kindness of his heart?
Yes.
So it wasn't a car. It was the car. It was your car.
Right. It was my car.
Yeah. And part of the problem here was that during the month of February, Mr. Tucker had flown to Florida and then was gone the entire month of February, correct?
I don't remember. I don't think he was gone the entire month of February.
He was gone for an extended period of time?
He may have been.
But in any case, the car that they were talking about was your car that you had. Let me go back. You got a new car, right?
Yes.
You got a Mercedes?
Yes.
An SUV Mercedes?
Yes.
Did the children go with you when that car was picked out?
I wasn't there when the car was picked out. The children went with Chris to pick out the car.
And to your knowledge, did Chris let them pick out the color for the car?
I don't know. I think they may have mentioned that before, but I don't know. The children told me that they actually went with Chris.
When he bought the car for you?
Right.
You mentioned giving the Arvizo family a cashier's check for Christmas as a present, correct?
Correct.
And that was in the year 2001, for the Christmas 2001?
Yes.
And you sent that to them with a nice Christmas card and a note, right?
I'm sure I did, yes.
And as a matter of fact, they also gave you some Christmas presents and gift certificates for your son, correct? Do you recall that?
I remember them giving me gift certificates. I don't know when it was, if it was that Christmas or Mother's Day. They would send me gifts from time to time, different holidays.
So the feeling between you and the kids was that it was one of that close, that you would actually exchange gifts and pleasantries with each other, correct?
Correct.
I actually just have one more question.
Great.
I know that's a great relief to you. Actually, I have two, I'm sorry. That's a lawyer's problem. They can never ask just one. But the exhibit that Mr. Mesereau handed you, which is the 5095, which is the one with the information on it.
Okay.
That I'm showing you now. Actually, the document itself contains an affectionate note from Neverland to you before all the information about the driver's license and all that, does it not?
Yes.
And in fact, there's like a heart at the top of it with February. And then there's a nice note to you about how much she loves you and cares for you.
Yes.
And then the information is below that?
And then the driver's license information.
Okay. She signs it, love, your little sister.
Right.
Okay. Now we can get to the last question.
Okay.
At the time you were with the Department of Social Services workers and just before you were asked to leave, do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall telling the Department of Social Services that you would like to stay because you considered these people your family?
I didn't say that. Janet said that. She said she would like for me to stay because I am her family.
Do you recall making this statement? I mean, I'm here to support my family. That's, but I understand your policies about it. If she wants, she needs me with them. Did you make that statement?
Maybe I did. I don't know. I don't really remember saying that. I may have said that, yes.
But you used the term, family.
Right.
There, to support my family.
I don't know if I said there to support my family, but I have used my family, that term before when talking about them. So I may have said it that day.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Pryor. Nowhere in the Bashir documentary does Mr. Jackson ever say, "I sleep with little boys," does he?
No, that was an issue that Janet and I talked about. My understanding of watching the documentary was that Mr. Jackson said that children have slept in his bed and he slept on the floor. And that was another issue why we didn't understand there was being such a big uproar about this when he clearly said that he slept on the floor.
And Mr. Jackson makes a point to say that he never has any sexual contact with children, right?
I believe he did.
The words, "I sleep with little boys," are just made up by the government, right?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. That is argumentative, and I'd ask counsel to be admonished for this.
Sustained. It's argumentative.
Now, Mr. Jackson also in that documentary talks about children needing more love and attention, doesn't he?
Yes.
He talks about kids bringing guns into schools, doesn't he?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as leading, suggestive.
Sustained.
Now, the prosecutor, Mr. Sneddon, talked about Mr. Jackson holding hands with Gavin, correct?
Correct.
Isn't it correct that Gavin often wanted to hold hands with people around him?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. Calls for a conclusion, speculation, and it's leading.
Sustained.
Did you ever see the rebuttal footage of the Arvizos family interview when Janet says to Gavin, "Let's hold hands"?
I haven't seen any rebuttal footage of the Arvizos, no.
Do you remember Janet often saying, "Let's hold hands"?
Yes.
She said that to you, didn't she?
I don't remember.
Didn't Janet tell you that her family all held hands and prayed to God that they would meet Michael Jackson and Chris Tucker?
Yes, she did.
And when the prosecutor, Mr. Sneddon, asked about the Arvizos being affectionate, you agreed with him, right?
Very much so.
When he said they were very unduly and very quickly affectionate with people, you agree with that, right?
Very much so, yes.
And they used to immediately hug people, correct?
Yes.
People they hardly knew, right?
I don't know, but I don't know. I haven't really been around them when they just met strangers, but anyone who I ever brought around them, yes,
I'm sorry.
they were very affectionate towards them.
Part of their being affectionate was also holding hands at times, right? Ever see them hold hands?
Well, Your Honor, she was waiting for the answer to the first question.
I've seen them hold hands.
All right, that's okay. Go to your next question.
Okay. Now, the prosecutor, Mr. Sneddon, asked you if you'd been to the Soto Street address, right?
Yes.
Have you been to the grandparents' address?
No.
But you've been to what you now know is Jay Jackson's address, correct?
Yes.
When Devellin and Janet were asking you for a car, did you know whether or not Jay Jackson was supporting them?
I was not aware that Jay Jackson was even in the picture during this time.
Okay. Was Janet and Devellin, were they telling you they were too poor to get a car?
Object. Calls for hearsay and leading.
Compound. Sustained.
At the time they were asking you for a car, did you know whether or not Janet was collecting welfare checks?
Object. Your Honor. This is compound and leading.
It's sustained. Compound.
Well, when they consistently called you, call after call, and asked for an automobile, did they tell you in any of those conversations that they were too poor to buy a car?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that as argumentative in the use of the word consistently.
Sustained.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
No questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. You may step down.
Thank you.
Your Honor, our next witness would be Mr. Nimmer.
Mr. Sanger? I'll come get it.
Are you prepared to show me that? To the jury, all right. I have to review a piece of evidence here that's going to take, according to counsel, 19 minutes and 8 seconds.
3 seconds.
3 seconds. So I'm going to let you go outside and have some more soup.
There's none left.
Ah.
Your Honor, are you ready to proceed?
Yes. Is it 1 or 4?
All right. Before I start it, let me just state for the record that we have Exhibit 5089, which I think I already identified for the record. I've put that in the machine, and then we'll keep a good thought. It might be helpful if we could have the lights. Thank you. I know there's somebody usually on the other side there.
Is there sound?
No, there is no sound with this, Your Honor. Whereupon, a DVD, Defendant's Exhibit 5089, was played for the court. That's the end of the video, and we would propose to have Mr. Nimmer narrate basically where he was when he was shooting, and he would say, this is the front gate, this is Figueroa, this is the guest unit, that sort of thing.
Judge, as I indicated earlier, I believe that a good deal of what's in this video is inadmissible. And particularly objectionable is those parts that deal with having staff out there doing things, basically scripted, is probably not a good word to use in light of everything that's happened in this courtroom, but certainly the way they're performing on the video and performing for the camera specifically. Secondly, there are some parts about this that there is no way to establish that this is the way that the premises looked at the time of the events in February and March of 2003. And I believe this video, portions of it were filmed earlier this year and maybe portions of it recently, and we know for a fact that certain portions of it are different from when we went out there, when members of the Sheriff's Department went out there in December of 2004. So it's misleading to the jury in the sense that it portrays certain locations and places different than they were and certain facilities. If this were simply a video of somebody showing the zoo or showing the giraffes or showing the amusement park, and you can see it's unduly suggestive in the fact that they have notes on the board that are obviously propaganda in the sense they're notes with, "We love you, Daddy," and in the mailroom where they took them, there was actually a sign of protest dealing with this case. Those things don't belong in front of the jury, and it's highly inappropriate focusing on one particular picture and one particular room. And so I just think that this video should not be admitted. It's 352. It's of little or no value to the jury, and that it would tend to mislead the jury as to the factual issues they have to make. And I think it's particularly misleading with regard to the fact of the clocks. There's some testimony about where the clocks were. It's not inconsistent with what's portrayed here, but the way they portrayed it here is the way the clocks were operating when this video was taken, and it misleads the jury that they may have been operating differently at another time. And so I think in all respects that this video should not, in its current condition, be submitted to this jury for observation and review, and we object to that, Your Honor. Thank you.
Well, I think I did deny the request to go to the Neverland Ranch, but I had in mind, when I denied that the parties would be capable of showing the property with a video such as this. And there's some truth to the fact they're showing. I guess it's probably the typical welcome that the guests get at Neverland when they go there, but I don't think it's a prejudicial issue, and I'll allow the film.
Judge, I can't convince the court that they should edit out some of the parts that are really inappropriate for the jury to see. It's a simple editing job. It seems to me if you're going to let some of it in, that's fine. But it also seems to me that some of those things are really not appropriate, particularly the writings on the chalkboard and…
Well, I don't know. It moves pretty rapidly. I mean, I didn't get the feeling that I could read any of that material. It moves right along. I started to look at it, and about the time I was understanding what might be there, it was gone. So I don't really see any problem with it. I would not want you dwelling on those items with your narrator, if you had that in mind. You haven't said that you do.
No. In fact, we will make it clear the narrator did this in 2005. It says it right on the video. And the thing on the board was just there when he was out there. It was Mr. Jackson's kids had written something, evidently. But that's clear he did it in 2005, and the jury will know it wasn't in 2003.
All right.
What I'd propose to do is to play the other tape first, the one we have an agreement on, and we can probably do that before we have the break.
All right, let's have the jury come in, and we'll play the other part first. Did you call them in?
I did.
When you get to the witness stand, please remain standing. Face the clerk over here. Raise your right hand.
Yes, I do.
Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record.
Hello, Laurence, or Larry, Nimmer. Laurence is Laurence. Nimmer is Nimmer.
Thank you.
Okay, may I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Nimmer, how are you presently employed?
I have a legal graphics, demonstrative evidence company.
All right, and you did just the right thing. We have to tell every witness to sit right up into that right microphone.
Okay.
All right, and how long have you had a legal graphics company?
I've had my company for 13 years, and I've worked in the field another 2 years.
All right, can you give us your background, training, and experience that leads up to your being employed in the legal graphics field?
Well, I have an undergraduate degree in architecture, and then I studied broadcasting at San Francisco State University. I worked in TV news for the CBS affiliate in San Francisco. And I've been involved in graphics and multimedia for the last 30 years.
Now, as far as the legal graphics aspect and legal documentation aspect is concerned, I think you've said you've been doing this for about 15 years?
Correct.
All right, and during that 15 years, have you had occasion to prepare exhibits for presentation in court cases?
Yes, quite a few.
Is that one of the main things that you do?
That is correct.
All right, can you tell us whether or not you have been called to testify in any of the courts in this general area?
Yes, I have.
And what courts do you recall testifying in?
Santa Barbara, Ventura, Los Angeles.
Have you testified in Santa Maria courts?
I don't believe I've testified here. I've had trial exhibits in these courts.
Have you testified in San Luis Obispo?
I have not testified there. I've had trial exhibits there.
Your exhibits have been received in court without your testimony?
Correct.
All right, now, over the course of your work in the last 13 years in your own company, about how many cases have you prepared exhibits for?
Between 900 and 1,000.
And about how many exhibits do you believe have been, to your knowledge, admitted into evidence in court?
I would guess around 1,000 exhibits.
So you prepared.
I'd estimate.
So you've prepared more than one exhibit.
Per trial.
Per case?
Yes.
So a percentage of the cases you work on go to trial, and of those, there's a number of exhibits per case that might go before a jury or before a judge. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, now, have you worked primarily in the criminal area or the civil area?
Your Honor, in order to expedite this, I'll stipulate to his qualifications. We can just move on to the.
I'll accept the stipulation. I need to ask a couple more foundational questions for the first tape, but.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, as far as the work that you do, does part of it involve preparing diagrams and charts for court?
Yes.
Does part of it involve preparing video documentation?
Yes.
And can you explain what the purpose is to video documentation, in general? What are you doing when you're doing that?
Generally, it's to give an objective view of a scene, or an object, or whatever the subject matter.
And have you worked for both sides in cases, both the plaintiff's side and the defense side?
Yes, I have.
When you say, I think you said, an objective view. Were those your words?
Yes.
Is it possible to manipulate video or visual media to give a distorted view of something?
Yes.
Do you attempt to avoid that when you're preparing a video documentation?
Yes, I do.
Can you explain what kind of video documentation you often prepare for court cases?
I've done day in the life videos that document, if someone's been injured, what their quality of life is now or when they were involved in a certain job. I've documented accident scenes, different environments, buildings, that type of thing.
Alright, and you mentioned day in the life. Can you just explain just briefly what that means?
Well, if someone in a personal injury case has been injured, sometimes I will follow them around and show what their quality of life now is for the jury to be able to evaluate what their problems are or what their lifestyle is like, basically.
Alright, in this particular case, did you prepare 2 different videos? In fact, what I'll do, Your Honor, let me back up for a second. During the break, I asked that a DVD, which I'm calling a video, be marked as Exhibit 5096, and it's entitled, Neverland Alarm Test. And then prior to this, I believe out of the presence of the jury, we had already identified a video entitled, Neverland Ranch 2005, and that was marked for identification as 5089.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. May I approach the witness with these exhibits?
Yes.
Alright, you have before you Exhibit 5096?
Yes.
Okay, do you see the little yellow tab on there?
I do.
Okay, and what is that?
The Neverland Alarm Test.
And is that a video that you created?
Yes, it is.
Alright, now, with regard to that video, did you have a particular assignment that you were asked to carry out?
Yes, I did. Should I describe it?
Yes, please.
I was asked to document the sound of the alarm in the private suite of Mr. Jackson, both downstairs in the private suite and upstairs in the bedroom area.
Okay, when we say, alarm, I suppose that's what it says on the video. Can you describe what this is? You say, alarm. What is it?
Yes, it's kind of a chime sound that is triggered when someone walks in the outer area of the private suite.
Alright, and did you have occasion to go to Mr. Jackson's home?
Yes, I did.
Did Mr. Jackson give you permission to go in there and spend the time you needed to do this video?
Yes.
Alright, did you have any assistance in doing this video?
I used the assistance of a maid on the property to walk out and walk in to trigger the alarm. I had an assistant with me for some other purposes, but during the alarm test, I didn't have any other really assistance on that.
So basically for the alarm test, you pretty much commandeered somebody who was working that day. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you asked her to walk through the hallway area to set off the chimes, or the bell, or whatever it was, correct?
That's correct.
And then what did you do to record the sound of that bell?
I used my professional video camera, it's a Sony VX2100, and I used the internal stereo microphone on the camera to record the sound.
Did you make any modifications to that camera in order to do this test?
No.
How long have you had that camera?
Approximately a year and a half.
And have you used that camera during the last year and a half routinely in other cases?
Yes. About every day, every other day.
Alright, so that's your regular everyday camera is what you're saying.
Correct.
Alright, now, in the course of doing this, we're going to show it, but before we do, or we're going to ask to show it. Before we do, though, I want you to set it up a little more. In the course of this, do you recall where you were standing during the first part of the test?
During the first part of the test, I was inside the private suite area downstairs, perhaps about 15 feet from the front door, opposite the front door.
And do you remember the name of the particular employee who you asked to help you?
I believe her name was Maria.
Do you remember her last name?
No.
Does Maria Gomez sound right? Or you don't know?
I'm afraid I don't know her last name.
I'd like to refer to her by her last name. Is there any objection to my doing that? Miss Gomez? I can represent to the court, as you'll see, that's who it is.
Is there any problem with that, Mr. Sneddon?
I'm assuming that's who it is.
So I'll refer to Miss Gomez.
Okay.
Just so we're proper and polite here. What did you instruct Miss Gomez to do?
I instructed her, once the camera was recording, to walk out and then walk back in.
Now, did you have her go down the hallway a certain point?
Correct. There's an outer hallway where the alarms or the chimes are triggered. I had her walk through there so she was on the other side of it, and then walk in.
You say the other side of the hallway. Would that be the door that's adjacent to the foyer and the front door?
That's correct.
So you had her walk down that little hallway and turn around and walk back into the room, is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you have her close the door behind her as she went out?
Yes. And possibly it automatically closed.
Okay, now, and the first test was you standing on the first floor of Mr. Jackson's suite, private suite area, and doing just what you said. What was the second test?
The second test was upstairs in the private bedroom area. My camera was positioned 2 or 3 feet kind of behind the bed. So we see the bed in the foreground pointing towards the stairway where people walk up to get upstairs to the private bedroom. And your question was, what was the test?
Well, I think you answered my question. I think. But let's try another question. Alright, and that's where you were located. So then what did you instruct Miss Gomez to do?
I instructed her, similar to the first test, to walk downstairs, walk through the room downstairs, through the hallway downstairs where the alarm is triggered, to walk all the way out into the foyer area, and then to turn around and walk back in through the hallway, through the downstairs area, up the stairway into the private bedroom.
Alright.
And I should mention we had the door open at the bottom of the steps.
So we're going to get to that. The second test we're going to see, the door at the bottom of the steps.
Of the stairway.
It's an internal door in between the first floor room and the hallway and stairway leading up to the second floor room. There's a door there, is that correct?
That's correct.
So the second test, in the sequence of 3 tests here, you had the door open, correct?
That's correct.
And then what was the third test?
The third test was just the same as the second test. However, we had the door closed at the bottom of the stairway which leads up to the upstairs bedroom.
Alright, now, have you had a chance to listen to and watch the video that you prepared?
Yes.
You were there, of course, during the time this was being filmed? You were the one filming it, correct?
Correct.
Did you have an opportunity to compare what you heard on the video to what you heard with your own ears as you were standing there?
Yes.
Does the video fairly and accurately depict what you heard?
I'd say fairly and accurately. Perhaps the last test, with the door closed downstairs, I believe the alarm actually sounded somewhat louder in person than you'll hear it on the tape. But otherwise, I believe it's more or less like the experience of being there.
Alright, and with that, Your Honor, I'd like to play 5096, if we may. I think I need to move it into evidence first, which I do.
No objection.
All right, it's admitted.
And, alright, and now I've got to retrieve it.
Okay, whereupon, a DVD, Defendant's Exhibit 5096, was played for the court and jury.
Okay, may I proceed with questioning? Now, with regard to Exhibit 5096, you just heard it?
Correct.
Does that appear, as you listen to it, to be a fairly accurate depiction of what you were able to hear of the bell?
Well, as I said, the last test with the door closed, I remember hearing it very clearly. Here, you hear it, but not that loudly. So other than that, I'd say it's fairly accurate.
Now, there seems to be a faint bell that seemed to be triggered when Miss Gomez was going out, but not every time. Did you hear that?
I noticed that, and I don't know why it's inconsistent that way.
In other words, sometimes it seemed there was a faint bell set off when she went out the door, and other times there was no bell at all that you could hear. Is that correct?
Correct. And sometimes the bell seemed louder when she went out. Sometimes it didn't seem to trigger at all when she went out, but it always seemed to trigger when she came in.
Okay, now, you have in front of you 5089?
That's correct.
Alright, and is that the DVD that you compiled as a result of visiting and going around the Neverland Ranch itself?
Yes, it is.
And is that video cut from longer? I want to say film, but it's not film, it's all on video, so whatever you call it. Is that cut from a longer series of shots?
Yes, it is.
And what did you try to do in compiling that video?
I tried to give an objective view of the experience of a visitor to Neverland.
Alright, there is some people who are seen in the video at various places. People, for instance, driving a tractor or golf cart or something like that. Were they planted there by you or were they actually doing that?
They were actually doing that.
Now, there are some scenes for instance, where you have some people lined up. There are people lined up as you're going into the main house. Did you ask them to do that for a particular reason?
Yes, I was told that often, when visitors come, the staff stand out in front and greet the visitor. so I asked if I could experience that as well with my camera.
So that is something you requested as opposed to somebody just driving a tractor on the property?
Correct. And I think there's also a repeat of the scene of Miss Gomez walking in the downstairs private suite, and I arranged for that shot, too.
Alright, and there are a couple of others where there's, at the train station or the theater where people are offering you something or holding out something. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And was that arranged?
That was arranged. I asked if they could have it as it would normally be for a visitor and what the experience was like.
Alright, very well.
We'll take our break now.